Hello viewers, this is Jake and welcome to another episode of my Go Angular tutorial. In this episode we're going to be using Websockets to build a chat application. So I'm going to demo that for you now. I've got an instance of Firefox and Chrome open and both connected to my server. So if I type in a message in one, it appears on the other. Alright, so let's build this. Okay, so if you did tutorial 1, which you should have, you'll already have a clone of all of the code for this whole, well, not for the whole series, for whatever I was at when you cloned it. So go ahead and delete tutorial 2 because we're just going to build that from scratch. So I have it running still. Sublime Text likes to hold on to your files if you have them open. Okay, so go ahead and make a copy of tutorial 1. And we're going to start editing from that baseline. The first thing we're going to do is add an external dependency on the Gorilla WebSocket library. You can easily tell what an external dependency is because it's basically a URL. And Go has the capability to go out and get that data downloaded locally for you so you don't have to. And you do that by running the go get command and you give it the URL. Now technically I already had it downloaded, but if you go to your GoPath source directory, you'll now see there's a GitHub Gorilla WebSocket that it downloaded. So it downloads all the source for you. It even includes the .git. I'm not sure if it works for Subversion, but definitely for Git. And if this is something that you control, you can start working on this right away. So it's actually a really cool command. So the next thing we're going to need is a handler that will accept a WebSocket connection. So I'm going to copy this one, and we're going to call it WS handler, and the path will be WS. And we're going to be using handle func at first because it's simpler, but later we're probably going to be switching back to handle. Handle takes a handler which we'll have to implement. It's much easier just to provide a function like this one. So I'm going to copy this out. We're going to create a function up here called WSHandler. And this signature should look pretty familiar to everyone. We have a writer, so anything we write to this will be returned to the client, and then this is the client's request. So once our WebSocket hits this WS, it will come into this function, and then we can do stuff with it. The first thing we're going to do with it is upgrade the connection. So I guess the way it works is a WebSocket, first you come in with an HTTP connection, and then that gets upgraded by the server into a WebSocket connection. So this is a snippet of code that Gorilla has on their website. So it just calls upgrade on these two variables, and if it's successful, then you get this connection object back. And you're always going to want to close that connection object, so we're going to defer close. So this is kind of a better version of a Java finally or a Python finally. If this ever exits, close will be called. So basically we don't want to ever leave this function unless we're intentionally closing it or the client closes it. So I'm going to put this infinite loop here, and the first thing we're going to do is read a message from the client, and this returns a number of parameters. The first is the message type. It'll always be text for this episode, so I'm just going to ignore it. The next is the actual message, and then last, as is typical with Go, is the error. So if we ever get an error that isn't nil, we're just going to get out of here, and then that will of course close the connection because it's deferred. So now that we have the actual message, we can print that out. We need to cast it as a string though because it is a byte array. Okay, and so this first pass, let's just send that message back to whoever just set it. And like I said, this will always be a text message. Whoa. So let's just set it to text message, and then we're going to send the message they sent us. and this also returns an error, so we're going to do the same thing here. So let's see if that compiles, and it does not. All we need to say, this is from the HTTP package. Okay, and undefined. Okay, I went a little crazy with this pattern here. So Go has this particular pattern where, so like this if statement, you can create a variable here and then check that's error, but looks like the scope is limited. So up here, I'm just gonna have to do that, and this will probably want this to be equals 28 non-bool error. Oh, oops. All right, that should do it. Okay, so we have the server running. At least we think it's working now. So let's go ahead and work on the client. So let's pop out to our File Explorer. Under the web directory, we're gonna copy test, and we're gonna call this chat. Open it up, and we're gonna get this guy. We'll call chat now. Don't need that. Let's get rid of that. We will need a text input. We'll call this model message instead of yes. So the first thing is we need to name our app. I'm going to call it chat, and we're going to add a controller. I always call my first controller main controller. Okay, so let's write our app. The first thing you do is call Angular.module, and you give it the name of your application. Oops, I call it chat. And this is where your dependencies go. We don't have any yet. And now with this app variable, we can, whoa, that's a funny autocomplete. We can start defining things like a controller. And our controller will need a scope. We're going to need a list to store all the messages we get from the server. And we're just going to, for now, let's just display this up here. Messages. So basically Angular is almost overkill for this. We could just do this in plain JavaScript, but I like Angular, so we're going to start with it. We're going to make a WebSocket connection. And to do that, we call Websocket, and we connect to our path. So you might recognize this as the path we set up earlier in our server. So that will go ahead and try to make a connection with our server. Now the way that WebSockets work is you get a number of callbacks. So once the server closes the connection, onClose will get called. Similarly, we have onOpen. And then we also have onMessage. So those are the most important ones. So once we get a closed message, there's really not much else to do besides display a message that we've closed. Since this is Angular, and this is a callback that exists in a third-party library, you have to call scope apply in order to get basically your scope in there. Otherwise, you'll see some funny behavior. Either it will do nothing or it'll do something occasionally. So we're going to push disconnected, and we're going to do the same thing on open, except we'll say connected. Okay, and so when we receive a message, we're going to display the message. So we're going to push e.data, because data is going to be the text message that they send. We're also going to need a way to actually send data from this application. So we say scope send. So we're going to create a new method that we can call, and we call connection send with whatever's in our message. So this message matches up with this message, and then let's go ahead and blank out that message. I guess we need a send button as well. So Z button class button. I like using button primary. Give it a little bit of color. Send. And when this is clicked, we're going to call send. So in Angular, on click send, that will look in scope for something called send, and we'll execute it. Which, good thing it's function, because then it will send whatever is in this scope message, which is the scope message. So let's see if it's working now. There's our chat, and it looks like it's busted. So on Chrome you hit F12, and you can bring up console here. Looks like I've got a typo, Websocket. So refresh. Okay, good, we're actually connecting. If I send a test message, nothing's happening. Oh, okay. It is ng click, not on click. So refresh again. And great, it worked. So our echo server is working. Let's make this a little bit nicer looking. Let's just create, use an ng repeat. That way we're a little more vertical. So if we refresh that, test. Great, so we have an echo server working. So this echo server is cool and all, but we set out to make a chat server. So in order to do that, we're going to need to store these connections somewhere. So let's use a map of WebSocket connections to booleans. We're actually not going to use the bools. We just need to get out a map here. So let's also make a function called sendAll that will take a message that we want to send to every connection, and we're going to loop over all of the connections and basically do this down here. So I'm going to steal this. And so when we call sendAll, we're going to loop over the connections, and we're going to write whatever message that we were told to send all. Also, if there's a problem, if there's an error, we're going to remove from the connections this connection that had the problem. And we're also going to need that down here. So we also need to add the connection if we're getting a new one. So connections is true. And send all is the final piece. So if I kill this one and rerun it, it worked. Now I'll pull up two different browsers. Nope, something's wrong. Getting an error. So this is what a Go Panic looks like. Oh. I actually know what I did without having a look at this error. I never made this map. So I need to say connections equals make this map. So refresh. Connected. Connected. Hi. Great, so it's working. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I know there's a lot of stuff I glossed over, so as usual, if You leave a comment asking for clarification on something, I will make another video for that. Leave comments, tell me if I'm doing it well, subscribe, like, do all that good stuff. Thanks for watching.